I used to think marriages fell apart with a bang. Some dramatic event, a screaming match, a slammed door. But in my case, it was a slow leak. A quiet daily drain I didn't even realize was happening until I was empty. My name is Julia Morgan.
I'm 39.
I work in senior care administration just outside Portland, Oregon. My life was built on structure, routines, calendars, plans. I was the kind of woman who kept every birthday card. The kind who folded laundry right out of the dryer. The kind who believed that love meant staying even when it hurt. My husband, David Morgan, is 43. He's a commercial photographer, the kind who traveled a lot, met a lot of people, and always had a story about the weird snacks offered on flights. He was charming. Quietly funny. He used to make pancakes on Sundays just to see our son laugh when he flipped them too high and made a mess. I thought we had the kind of marriage people envied. Stable. Uncomplicated. We weren't loud, but we were consistent. Or so I thought. Started with a phone call. Not a dramatic one. Just that. Hey, he said, his voice calm, too calm. Flight's delayed again. I'll be back late. I was used to delays. Used to the sound of airports in the background. But something felt off. Everything okay? I asked, stirring pasta while our 10-year-old son, Caleb, colored at the kitchen table. There was a pause. Yeah, just tired. That pause lodged itself in my head and stayed there. That was 4 months ago. Since then the pauses kept coming. In his sentences. In our kisses. In the way he looked at me. Like he wasn't really seeing me. Like his thoughts were someplace I wasn't invited. He started traveling more. Always for client work. Always short notice. His clothes changed. His taste in cologne changed. His smile, it started to seem practiced. I told myself I was imagining it. That I was paranoid. That the stress of raising a kid and working full-time was just messing with me. But it wasn't. And I knew it. One Saturday afternoon, I went into the laundry room and reached into his jacket before tossing it into the washer. I wasn't snooping, I told myself that, at least. Just making sure no receipts or gum were inside. That's when I found it. A folded envelope. Not addressed. Just neatly tucked in the inner pocket. Inside was a handwritten note, short and sharp. I hate how we have to keep pretending. But I love what we have. Thursday can't come fast enough. G. At first my brain didn't register it. I stood there, laundry in one hand, note in the other. I even laughed under my breath like I'd found someone else's letter by mistake. But it wasn't a mistake. My husband had been in Seattle that Thursday. He said he was shooting a food series for a new restaurant opening. I stared at the note for a long time. Then I folded it exactly the way I found it and placed it back in the pocket. I didn't confront him. Not that day. Because I wasn't ready to hear him lie to my face. That night I watched him sleep. His back turned toward me. His breathing steady. He looked like a man who had no worries in the world. And I realized something that nearly broke me in half. He wasn't afraid of being caught. Because he didn't think I'd ever look. The next morning, I drove Caleb to soccer practice, sat in the car for 20 minutes, then drove to a place I hadn't been in years. The building where David used to rent his old studio. I still remember the code he used on most doors. 0-3-1-7. Our anniversary. To my surprise, the studio was still in his name. When I opened the door, it was dark. Quiet. But not empty. There were 2 wine glasses on the desk. A throw blanket draped on a chair I knew we didn't own. A half-burned candle with a label I'd never seen before. It smelled like vanilla and rose. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even move for the first minute. I just stared at the space where my marriage had come to rot quietly in the dark. And still, I didn't tell him what I saw. Because I wasn't sure what I wanted. Was I angry? Yes. Was I ready to blow it all up? No. Not yet. Instead, I started to observe. Like I wasn't his wife anymore. Like I was someone outside looking in. I tracked his trips. Noted his words. And then a week later, the strangest thing happened. I got a message from a woman named Jillian on Facebook. We weren't friends. But the message was short. I need to talk to you. It's about David. I stared at the message from Jillian for a long time. I need to talk to you. It's about David. My hands trembled a little. Even though I was sitting on the couch with a blanket over my lap, and Caleb was only a few feet away building a Lego spaceship. I clicked on her profile. It was mostly private. Her name, Jillian Carson. Maybe early 30s. One profile picture with a dog, another of a wine glass next to a journal. No mutual friends. No clear ties to anything in our world. Except for David. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I stared at her name like it might spell something else if I looked long enough. By that point, I was keeping notes. Yes, actual notes in the back of my day planner. Dates, trips, lies. The envelope. The wine glasses. The scent of someone else's perfume on a scarf I knew I didn't own. And now, Jillian. Later that night, I waited until David was asleep. Then I replied, "What is this about? Be direct." She responded within minutes. "I didn't know about you. I swear. But now I do. And I don't want to be part of it anymore. If you'll talk to me, I'll explain everything." I didn't sleep that night. And I didn't cancel our meeting the next morning. We met at a small coffee shop near downtown Portland. I got there 10 minutes early and sat in the back booth, my hands wrapped around a paper cup that had long gone cold. When Jillian walked in, I recognized her instantly. She looked like the kind of woman I used to worry about when David first started traveling more. Pretty but not flashy. Confident but not loud. She wore a black coat, no ring, no makeup. She spotted me and paused like she wasn't sure I'd stayed. I didn't stand. I just looked up and nodded. She sat across from me, folded her hands and said softly, "You have every reason to hate me. I get that." "I don't hate you," I replied. "I just want the truth." Jillian nodded. "Okay. Then here it is." And for the next 30 minutes, she gave me a version of my marriage I'd never seen. She met David 9 months ago, at a gallery opening in Seattle. He was there on assignment photographing the event. She was part of the planning team. He told her he was separated, said it was complicated, said he was still living in the house because of his son, but the marriage was functionally over. He told her I was cold, that I was controlling, that I cared more about spreadsheets than people. "He made it sound like you were already gone," she whispered. And I believed him. I'm not proud of that. She only found out about me 2 weeks ago. I saw a photo. On his phone. A school event. You, him, and Caleb. You were smiling. And it didn't look like a woman who was out of the picture. That was when she started digging. When she saw my full name on a tag in one of his emails, she found my Facebook profile. And realized everything he'd said was a lie. "I'm not here to beg for forgiveness," she said. I didn't want to be part of this anymore. I ended it. But I thought you deserved to know. He's been living 2 lives, Julia. I wanted to scream. But instead I sat there quietly listening. And then Jillian hesitated. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small black USB stick. "What's that?" I asked. "It's recordings. Some messages. Photos. I'm not proud of this. But once I found out the truth, I started saving everything. I knew one day it would matter." She slid the USB across the table. "I won't bother you again," she said. "But if you ever need proof, for court or closure, or just to remind yourself you weren't crazy, it's all there." Then she stood, walked out of the cafe and didn't look back. I drove home on autopilot. Caleb was at my sister's. David wasn't due back from San Diego until Sunday. That night, I plugged the USB into my laptop and opened the folder. Inside were audio files, screenshots, hotel receipts. One folder was labeled February, LA. Inside was a video. I clicked play. It was short. Maybe 20 seconds. Shot from across a bed. David, shirtless, laughing. Jillian's voice off screen. "You're trouble, you know that?" His reply. "Good thing I'm not married anymore." I paused the video. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there with the laptop open, staring at a man I thought I knew. The same man who still kissed me on the cheek when he got home. Who still said "love you" before walking out the door. He didn't just lie to me. He rewrote me. To someone else I wasn't Julia, his wife of 13 years. I was a cautionary tale. A ball and chain. A placeholder for a better life. That was when something inside me shifted. Not just the pain. Not just the betrayal. But the clarity. I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. The next morning David came home. He walked in like nothing was wrong. Hugged Caleb. Kissed me on the cheek. His bag still smelled like airport perfume. I asked, "How was San Diego?" He smiled. "Productive. Long days." I looked straight at him and nodded. "We need to talk." He blinked. "Now." "Yes," I said. "Now." I waited until Caleb was in his room before I said it. "I know about Jillian." David's face didn't fall. He didn't flinch. That was the worst part. It was like he'd already rehearsed his reaction. Like he knew this day was coming and just hoped it wouldn't be today. "What are you talking about?" he asked, putting his keys down too carefully on the counter. I didn't answer. I walked over to the dining table, pulled the chair back and sat down like we were about to discuss groceries. Then I opened my laptop and hit play. The video from the USB filled the room. Jillian's laugh, his voice, his lie. He stared at it. Quietly. Then he sighed. "Okay," he muttered. "So now you know." That was it.
No shock. No denial. No desperate apology.
Just acknowledgement. "I want to hear you say it," I said, my voice barely steady. "I want you to say it out loud." He ran a hand through his hair and finally sat down. "Yes. I was seeing someone." "Jillian." "Was?" I asked. He nodded. "It's over. It ended weeks ago." "Because she left you," I said sharply. "Not because you stopped." He didn't deny it. The silence between us filled the house. He glanced at the hallway where Caleb's bedroom was, then leaned forward. "You want to destroy everything now?" he asked. "Blow it up? We have a kid, Julia. Think about that before you go turning this into some courtroom drama." "You're unbelievable," I said. "You lied to me for months. You made me feel crazy. You looked our son in the eyes and pretended like everything was normal." "I was trying to protect him," he snapped. "No, you were protecting yourself." Then I asked him something I hadn't even planned on asking. "Was she the only one?" David looked away. And that was my answer. It wasn't just Jillian. It had been others. A whole second life I didn't know existed. That broke something in me that I wasn't sure could be repaired. Over the next few days we danced around each other like ghosts in the same house. I stopped pretending. He stopped explaining. He slept in the guest room. Caleb didn't know why, but he didn't ask. Children can sense when a storm is coming. They don't need thunder to hear it. One evening I heard Caleb crying in his sleep. I walked into his room and found him sitting up, clutching a crumpled drawing. "It was supposed to be us three," he whispered. "But Daddy left the park early." Again. I didn't have words. I just lay beside him and held him close. That night I made my decision. The next morning I called Jillian. Not because I wanted more details but because I wanted clarity. She sounded nervous when she picked up. "Julia, I need to know one thing," I said. "Did David ever mention a woman named Meredith?" There was a pause. "Yeah. Once or twice. I think they worked together a few years ago. He said she was clingy." "Why?" I thanked her and hung up. I remembered Meredith. She worked at a gallery David freelanced for 3 summers ago. I'd always thought something was off between them. The way she looked at him at a fundraiser. The way he rushed to change the subject when I asked about her. Back then, he told me I was being jealous and dramatic. Back then I believed him. Now, I didn't even recognize the man I had defended for years. 2 days later I sat across from my brother Lucas, in his small home office. He was a financial advisor, methodical, private, trustworthy. I told him everything. "I'm not here to cry," I said. "I need your help." Quietly. Lucas leaned back in his chair. "What are you planning?" "I want to separate finances. I want to make sure Caleb and I are protected. I want to see what's legally mine." Lucas nodded. "I'll help you." Then he looked at me seriously. "But Julia, if you do this, there's no going back." I met his eyes. "I don't want to go back. I found a lawyer. I filed paperwork. Quietly. I withdrew half the money from our joint savings and moved it into an account under my name and Caleb's. I froze the credit card David had used to buy hotel rooms and plane tickets. And then, I waited. I wanted him to feel the unraveling before I served the final thread. And that moment came the following Friday night. David walked into the house late, reeking of some bar stale perfume and cigarette smoke, his jacket over his shoulder. "Why isn't the card working?" he asked casually. I looked up from the table. Because it's no longer yours. He blinked. I filed for legal separation, I said. And custody. Effective this morning. His smile vanished. You're serious? As serious as the trust fund you forgot we built for Caleb, the one you tried to tap into last week. I froze that too. He didn't yell. He didn't rage. He just stood there. And for the first time in months I watched the mask slip. Not the charming David. Not the distant one. But the man behind both. Empty. Scared. And furious that I'd beaten him to it. You really think you can just erase me? He hissed. No, I said calmly. But I can erase what you've done. I can rebuild something better from what you left behind. He stood there unmoving as if waiting for me to crack. But I didn't. Not this time. Later that night I stood in Caleb's room watching him sleep. I looked down at his face and whispered, "You'll never be someone's afterthought. Not while I'm still standing." I turned off the light, walked to my room and locked the door. Because I knew the real storm hadn't even started yet. And I was finally ready for it. If you had told me a year ago that David would become my adversary, I wouldn't have believed you. But now, every interaction felt like a negotiation. A quiet, cold war inside a home that no longer belonged to either of us. He stayed in the guest room. We shared the kitchen like reluctant roommates. We kept our voices low around Caleb, but there was no hiding it anymore. Even he started referring to his dad's room as the other one. David didn't confront me the day I served the legal separation papers. He waited. 2 days later he retaliated. I got a call from my supervisor at work. I was in the middle of reviewing a Medicaid compliance case when the phone rang. "Julia," she said, her voice hesitant, "we received an anonymous tip. Someone filed a complaint about your conduct outside the workplace, possibly affecting your ability to handle sensitive medical data." "What?" I said, stunned. "What kind of conduct?" They didn't say. "But the board will be looking into it. You'll need to attend a review meeting next week." I hung up the phone and felt the blood drain from my face. David. I knew it was him. I knew the way he fought, through control, through quiet sabotage, through making me question my own foundation. But what he didn't know was that I was done playing defense. I spent that evening going through files, real and digital. David had once been sloppy with a Dropbox folder. Years ago, he used it to store everything: invoices, scanned contracts, client payments. And he'd never changed the password. I opened it. Still active. And what I found made my stomach twist. There were not just travel receipts, but notes, schedules, and something worse. An invoice from a private investigator. I clicked on the PDF. It was dated 2 weeks before I confronted him. The note attached was brief. Subject: Julia Morgan. Monitor travel and digital activity. Focus on financial movement. He had been spying on me. Before I ever said a word to him, he was preparing for war. That night, I forwarded the document to my lawyer, Melissa Carter. Melissa was ruthless. Sharp as glass. A woman I had once met during a legal workshop. The moment I told her what I'd found, her tone changed. "This is more than just marital misconduct," she said. "He weaponized personal surveillance. He's tracking your money, your movements. That's not just paranoid. It's strategic deception." She paused. "We need to be just as calculated now." The next day, I got an email from someone I hadn't heard from in over a decade. Subject: You don't know me now, but I used to know you both. The name? Sarah Brenner. David's ex-girlfriend from college. She was the girl he dated right before he met me. I hadn't thought about her in years. Not since that one awkward dinner party when she and her husband showed up as someone's plus one, and David refused to look her in the eye. Her message was short but direct. "I saw the court filing. I debated reaching out. But I think it's time someone told you the truth about David. If you're willing, I'd like to meet. There's something you deserve to know. And it goes back long before you married him." We met 2 days later at a small cafe just outside the city. She looked older, like me. Tired in a familiar way. The way women who've been quietly holding it together for years start to wear time. "I don't want to drag up the past," she said. "But you need context." She sipped her tea and stared at her hands for a moment. "When David and I were together, he lied to me. A lot. It wasn't just cheating, it was calculated erasure. He'd disappear for days. Say he was working. But I eventually found out he was living with someone else. Another woman entirely. My eyebrows rose. You mean he cheated on you with me? Sarah shook her head.
No.
Not you. Someone else. You were next. I felt something tighten in my chest. He's always been like this, she said. Different names. Different faces. He reinvents himself depending on who he's with. And when things get real, when the woman starts asking for more than charm, he starts building his exit. I swallowed hard. Why tell me now? Because he did the same thing to me, tried to make me feel like I was losing my mind, like I was the broken one. You're not broken, Julia. You're just waking up. After she left, I sat in my car for a long time, staring through the windshield, watching the rain gather and streak down like tears I didn't feel anymore. David wasn't just a cheater. He was a chameleon, a man who became whatever he needed to be, until that version no longer served him. I finally understood. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about identity, about erasure. And I refused to let him erase me. Back home, I packed a small bag for Caleb and me. I didn't tell David we were leaving. I just waited until Friday morning, after he left for a meeting, and I drove Caleb to my brother's cabin near the coast. It was small, quiet, untraceable, and there I made my plan. Melissa filed for full temporary custody. We presented the PI evidence. We included Jillian's affidavit and the recordings. And we added a sworn statement from Sarah Brenner. Everything was now on the record. Everything was documented. I wasn't fighting for revenge. I was fighting to protect my son from a man who built lives like sandcastles, beautiful, temporary, and always washed away when it no longer served him. 1 week later, David called. Voicemail. Julia, what is this? You disappeared with Caleb? You're acting insane. This isn't who you are. But it was. He just didn't recognize me anymore. Because for once, I wasn't the one being left behind. I was the one leaving. When I didn't return David's calls, he showed up at the house. I wasn't there, of course. Melissa had already advised me to stay out of our marital residence until the court granted a temporary hearing. Too risky. Too many ways he could twist it. But he did something worse. He called Caleb's school. Claimed he had full custody. Claimed I'd taken off with our son. He even tried to pick Caleb up, unannounced, on a Tuesday afternoon. I got the call from the principal while I was folding Caleb's pajamas at the cabin. Ms. Morgan, she said, her voice low and tense, we've had an issue with your husband trying to remove Caleb from school without notice. We followed protocol. He didn't get access. But he said you were mentally unwell. That you might be a threat to your own son. I dropped the phone. Literally. It slipped from my hand and hit the hardwood floor. Caleb was sitting on the couch playing a handheld game. He looked up at me, blinking slowly. I picked the phone back up, thanked the principal, and sat on the floor for what felt like forever. David had crossed a line I didn't think even he would dare approach. He was willing to question my sanity. As a mother, that was the moment I stopped being afraid and started preparing for war. The next day, Melissa filed a restraining order on our behalf, citing manipulation, emotional abuse, and active attempts at parental alienation. We had the school's testimony, the PI reports, the email chains from his other lives, the signed statement from Jillian, and something new. A recording Caleb had accidentally made on his tablet. He'd been filming himself building a tower with blocks. In the background was David's voice, talking on the phone. I'll say she's unstable. That's my only shot. If I can make it sound like she's breaking down, the court will side with me. They always go with the calm one. My stomach dropped when I heard it. Calm one. David had never raised his voice. Never hit me. Never even cursed. But that was his weapon, the illusion of composure. He didn't get angry. He got clever. But now he was recorded. Now the illusion had a crack. And through that crack I was going to shine every ugly truth he thought he could hide. The custody hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. It was supposed to be procedural. A standard review to determine temporary parental responsibilities. But David made it theatrical. He showed up with a new lawyer. A sharp, suit-clad man with a smug smile and a portfolio full of printed emails. They tried to paint me as paranoid. Unstable. Overworked. She has a history of anxiety, David's lawyer claimed. And she left the marital home with their child without consent. My client simply wants to ensure Caleb's safety. Melissa didn't flinch. She calmly introduced Exhibit B. The voice recording from Caleb's tablet. The courtroom fell quiet as David's voice played aloud, smooth and calculated. I'll say she's unstable. That's my only shot. When the audio ended, the judge narrowed her eyes. You were planning to lie under oath? She asked David directly. He stammered. It was taken out of context. The judge raised a hand. That's enough for today. I was granted full temporary custody. David was ordered to attend a psychological evaluation before further custody discussions. And a formal investigation into possible fraud involving his business finances was quietly opened after Melissa submitted documents linking personal expenses to business deductions, traced back to his time with Jillian. David tried to meet my eyes as the hearing ended. But I didn't look at him. Because in that moment I saw not a man I once loved, but a man who had tried to erase me with a story. And failed. That night, Caleb slept beside me in the cabin, his little hand resting on my arm. I like it here, he whispered. It's quiet. You're not sad anymore. I kissed his forehead and turned off the lamp. You know what, buddy? You make everything better. But as he drifted off, I felt the weight of something I hadn't yet faced. Something Sarah Brenner had hinted at during our cafe meeting. Something she said she wasn't sure I should know. But that if you start digging deeper, you might find that David's lies go further than just women. I hadn't had time to follow that thread until now. The next morning, while Caleb and my brother went for a walk along the beach, I opened my laptop and logged into our shared old storage server. One I hadn't touched in years. Buried beneath folders of family photos and Caleb's preschool drawings, I found something strange. A folder labeled simply, Black Ridge Legal. I didn't recognize the name, but the documents inside were contracts, dozens of them, all signed under a name I didn't know. A pseudonym. David had been conducting entire business transactions under another identity. I forwarded them to Melissa. Within an hour she called me. Julia, she said, her voice laced with tension. We're not just talking about infidelity anymore. We're talking about potential identity fraud. Shell corporations. This is bigger than a marriage breakdown. This could become criminal. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. I looked out the window at Caleb chasing seagulls, laughing as the wind tangled his hair. I had to make a decision. Expose David fully, risk scandal, maybe even jail time. Or protect my son from seeing his father dragged through public disgrace. What was the right thing? What was the least damaging truth? Because there wasn't a version of this that didn't come at a cost. That evening I stared into the fire pit, the wood crackling under the quiet coastal sky. I thought about the kind of mother I wanted to be. Not vengeful. Not timid. Just honest. So I called Melissa and told her what I had decided. We would file the fraud evidence but seal it under a private motion. We would keep Caleb's name out of it. As much as the law allowed. Because no matter how badly David had failed, I wouldn't. I would not become a woman defined by damage. I would become a mother rebuilt by clarity. The courtroom wasn't packed. Just the necessary few: David, his new lawyer, Melissa, myself, 2 court officers, a clerk, and silence thick enough to choke on. We weren't there for drama this time. We were there to end what had once been a marriage. To close the ledger on 13 years of shared groceries, broken apologies, and hollow I love yous. But endings never happen cleanly. Not when a man like David is cornered. He didn't go down without making one final move. 3 days before the final custody and divorce ruling, Melissa got the alert. David had filed an emergency petition. He was requesting joint custody again, claiming new evidence proved I had been manipulating Caleb, turning him against his father. The evidence? A photo of Caleb's drawing. It showed me, Caleb, and our dog on one side of a house, and David on the other. A fence dividing us. It was a child's scribble. Something Caleb had made during a therapy session. And David had subpoenaed the file from the therapist's office, violating the privacy clause I'd begged him to honor. The court allowed a hearing. And so I found myself explaining to a judge why my son drawing a fence wasn't psychological warfare. It was honesty. From a child, one who had watched his father disappear piece by piece, David took the stand. He spoke calmly, of course. Always did. He said he missed his son, that I was keeping them apart, that a mother's heartbreak shouldn't sever a father's bond. For a moment I almost believed his voice. Then Melissa asked one question. Mr. Morgan, are you aware that your son, Caleb, asked his therapist to stop sessions because, quote, he doesn't want to talk about daddy anymore? Did you think about that when you filed this emergency petition? David didn't answer. The judge did. Petition denied. Custody remained solely mine. And the divorce was finalized that same day. I kept full legal and physical custody of Caleb. I retained ownership of the house, my retirement accounts, and 65% of our remaining marital assets, including partial claims to David's freelance photography business, which had quietly collapsed over the past few months due to reputation loss. And David? He walked out alone. Without a son. Without a home. Without a name anyone trusted anymore. You'd think that would have felt like victory. But it didn't. Felt like something else. Not revenge. Not peace. Just closure. A chapter folding shut. A few weeks later I received a letter. It was handwritten. From David. I nearly threw it away, but something told me to read it. It wasn't long. It wasn't desperate. It was full of words he had never said when it counted. He admitted he had destroyed everything because he didn't know how to be real. He said he had spent his whole life building performances instead of relationships. That somewhere along the way, even he stopped recognizing the man in the mirror. He ended it simply. I know it's too late, but tell Caleb someday that I was sorry. That I knew he deserved better. So did you. I didn't cry. But I didn't burn it either. I folded it gently, placed it in a drawer. Not for Caleb, but for myself. A reminder of what I survived. Of what I rebuilt. 6 months passed. I returned to work full-time, quietly promoted to head administrator of our care facility. Caleb started 4th grade. He laughed more. He worried less. He stopped asking about his dad every night. And one Saturday morning, as we were sitting on the porch drinking hot cocoa with too many marshmallows, he turned to me and said, "Mom, you're stronger now." I looked at him, blinking back a sudden warmth behind my eyes. "You think so?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah. You don't whisper anymore when you're scared." That was the moment I knew I had done something right. Not because I'd won in court, but because my son saw me, not as a victim, but as a mother who stood up. And stayed standing. I bought us a new home. Not far from the old one but filled with light. No echoes of past arguments.
No drawers hiding betrayal.
Just windows. Books. Laughter. Caleb picked the color of his bedroom, electric blue.
I picked mine, orm grey.
Fitting, I suppose. Because life, I'd learned,